The American Revolution refers to a seismic moment in history, primarily because it led to the formation of the United States, a country whose economic and military power has been felt across the world. The Massachusetts Minutemen, who fired the shots heard around the world at Lexington and Concord, likely had little idea of the eventual influence their rebellion against British taxation would have. Secondly, the causes the revolution came to represent: liberty, representation, freedom, and independence laid the foundations for social democracies in the centuries that followed. Figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams could not have foreseen the near-sacred reverence with which their words would be treated in the generations to come. While the effects of the revolution may not have been immediately revolutionary, it's clear that the 13 colonies' struggle for independence from British rule had a significant and lasting impact. As with any revolutionary moment, it's vital to examine the causes and progression leading to the British surrender in 1783. Most studies of the American Revolution trace its beginnings to the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, a conflict with France over territory that ended in a British victory. The war solidified Britain's position as the most dominant European power, gaining vast tracts of land. However, Britain's increased control over its American colonies soon led to rebellion. The expensive conflict had resulted in new and unpopular taxes. The British government sought to raise revenue through taxes, starting with the Stamp Act of 1765, followed by the Townshend Acts of 1767 and the Tea Act of 1773. This caused growing resentment. The colonists felt these taxes were unfair, especially without representation in Parliament. Protests began to ask a simple question: why didn't the colonists have the same rights as British subjects? Two key events in Boston in the early 1770s further fueled resentment. In 1770, British soldiers opened fire on a protesting mob at the Boston Massacre, killing 5 colonists. In 1773, in response to the Tea Act, a group of Bostonians boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. These acts sparked a cycle of punitive measures by the British government, deepening the colonists' anger. Massachusetts and New England were now seen as hotbeds of rebellion, and war seemed inevitable. In September 1774, a group of delegates gathered for the First Continental Congress, including George Washington from Virginia and John and Samuel Adams from Massachusetts. While they did not demand independence at this first meeting, they issued a Declaration of Rights, including life, liberty, property, assembly, and trial by jury, laying the groundwork for future declarations. Frustration was growing, not only because of taxation but also due to the continued British military presence in the colonies, an issue that would soon escalate. The delegates agreed to meet for a second Congress. In the time between Congresses, war broke out. On April 18, 1775, British soldiers marched to Concord to seize an arms cache stockpiled by colonial militiamen. The two sides clashed at the Battle of Lexington and Concord, marking the first official battle of the Revolutionary War. This night also gave rise to one of the great revolutionary legends, Paul Revere, and other writers who spread the alarm, preparing the Massachusetts militia. By the time the Second Continental Congress convened in the summer of 1775, anti-British sentiment was entrenched. They voted to raise a Continental Army and appointed Washington as commander-in-chief. This began a series of battles throughout the fall and winter, starting with the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston. Though it was a British victory, these early skirmishes encouraged the colonial forces, giving them the inspiration to continue their fight. As more trouble brewed and early battles brought no clear victories, the colonists solidified their stance on July 4, 1776, when they voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence. This momentous document was the first time a nation's people formally asserted their right to choose their own government. It was drafted by a 5-man committee with Thomas Jefferson as the principal author. His famous words in the preamble read, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Herein lies the essence of the lasting impact of the American Revolution. These words, influenced by Enlightenment ideas, were a far cry from the European model of absolute monarchy. Of course, we know that this statement referred to only a small fraction of the population in the colonies. Women, men without property, and slaves were not considered to share those inalienable rights. Nevertheless, this marked the revolutionary beginning of what would become a long, imperfect process toward the democratic republic we know today. As the colonists declared their independence, the British sent a massive fleet with 34,000 soldiers across the Atlantic to crush the rebellion. From this point on, the Revolutionary War settled into a pattern of wins, losses, and stalemates for the next several years. Military history enthusiasts can find stories of Washington retreating across the Delaware River before launching a surprise attack on Christmas night in the early stages of the war. They can also reflect on the turning point of 1777 to 78 at Saratoga. The American victory at Saratoga was crucial as it prompted France, sensing British weakness, to join the war on the colonists' side. What had begun as a civil war was now an international conflict. With training from a professional army, notably the French aristocrat Marquis de Lafayette, Washington's forces rallied in the north. In the south, the colonists faced many setbacks, with the famous betrayal of Benedict Arnold's defection to the British being one of several mutinies within the Continental Army. The British occupied Georgia by early 1779 and captured Charleston, South Carolina, in May 1780 under General Cornwallis. However, leadership in the American ranks shifted, and Nathaniel Greene rose to prominence. His forces managed to push the British back to the Yorktown Peninsula. With Washington also advancing on them, the British were trapped and forced to surrender. Though contemporaries didn't necessarily see it that way, this surrender effectively marked the end of the Revolutionary War, with no further decisive actions before the British signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783. By signing the Treaty of Paris, Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States, allowing the colonists to build their free and independent country. We know that the story of the United States from here is not the legendary march of progress toward freedom and liberty that many envision. The shortcomings of the Founding Fathers and the damages caused by subsequent U.S. governments are well known. Nonetheless, from a weak confederation of 13 colonies in the 18th century, the United States became the most powerful nation in the world in less than 2 centuries. Some of the reasons for America's success can be found in the rights enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The American victory was in many ways a miracle, not only in the logistical feat of farmers overcoming an imperial army, but also in the triumph of new ideas over entrenched monarchical systems. A new kind of politics and new ways of thinking were born in what became history's greatest experiment, the United States. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.